This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Have you ever had one of those days where nothing is seriously wrong, yet you still feel exhausted? Your work is fine, your family is fine, and life is moving forward as usual. Yet somehow your mind refuses to slow down. You replay old conversations, worry about things that haven't happened yet, and wake up tired even after a full night's sleep. The exhaustion sits somewhere deeper than your muscles, somewhere you can't reach with a weekend nap or a vacation. It's the kind of tired that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from carrying too much. Millions of people live exactly this way. Not clinically depressed, not in crisis, but quietly drained in a way they've learned to accept as normal. They've forgotten what it feels like to be truly rested, not just physically but somewhere deeper. What I'm about to share isn't a miracle cure or a shortcut. It's a breathing technique practiced by millions around the world. And it begins with a question that sounds almost too simple to matter. What if the way you're breathing right now is quietly shaping the way you feel, think, and handle stress? What if the remote control you've been searching for has been right under your nose this entire time? The technique is called Sudarshan Kriya. It's a structured breathing practice that cycles through slow, medium, and fast rhythms in a precise sequence. It was developed in 1982 by Sri Ravi Shankar, a spiritual teacher from India who noticed something ancient traditions had understood for thousands of years. Every emotional state has a corresponding breathing pattern. When you're angry, your breath is short and sharp. When you're anxious, it's shallow and rapid, trapped in the upper chest. When you're calm, it's slow and deep. The connection is unmistakable and universal. Most of us assume this relationship flows in one direction. We feel something, and our breath changes as a result. But Sri Ravi Shankar's insight, now backed by decades of research, was that the relationship works both ways. You can use your breath to change how you feel, not by forcing positive thoughts or repeating affirmations, but by directly influencing your nervous system through nothing more than the way air moves in and out of your body. Something as automatic and overlooked as breathing could be a lever for emotional and physiological transformation. That idea is either the most obvious thing in the world or the most radical, depending on how you look at it. You take roughly 20,000 breaths a day. Every single one is a conversation between your brain and your body, mediated by the autonomic nervous system. This system has two main branches. The sympathetic triggers your stress response, the famous fight or flight. The parasympathetic activates your rest and digest state, the calm. In a healthy system, stress comes, you respond, the threat passes, and your body returns to baseline. But that's not the world most of us live in anymore. That ancient machinery is now running non-stop against modern pressures it was never designed to handle. We live with endless notifications, deadlines, traffic, financial anxiety, social comparison, and constant low-grade stress. Your body doesn't know the difference between a tiger chasing you and a passive-aggressive email from your boss. The physiological response is identical. Cortisol spikes, heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, and blood flows away from digestion toward your muscles, preparing you to fight or flee. The problem is you're not fighting or fleeing. You're sitting in a chair, and those stress chemicals just keep circulating with nowhere to go. Over time, this becomes your body's default setting. You literally forget what calm feels like. Here's the critical piece that connects directly to Sudarshan Kriya. Most autonomic functions are completely involuntary. You can't decide to slow your heartbeat through willpower alone. You can't tell your adrenal glands to stop producing cortisol on command. But breathing is different. It sits on the border between voluntary and involuntary. You can control it consciously, right now, in this moment. And when you change how you breathe, everything else starts to shift. This is the doorway. This is the mechanism that makes breath-based practices so uniquely powerful. The practice wasn't born in a laboratory. It emerged during a 10-day period of silence in 1982 beside the Bhadra river in the Indian state of Karnataka. According to Sri Ravi Shankar's account, The complete sequence came to him during meditation, not as an intellectual concept but as an integrated technique ready to be shared. He began teaching small groups. Word spread slowly at first, then exponentially. Today, more than 450 million people worldwide have been introduced to the practice through the Art of Living Foundation. Independent researchers from Harvard, Yale, and major Indian medical institutions have studied its effects. The findings are striking enough that even skeptical observers have taken notice. Now let me walk you through what actually happens when someone sits down to learn this for the first time, because this is what you're probably searching for. You want to know what the experience is really like. Imagine walking into a room. Maybe it's a community center, a yoga studio, or someone's living room. You're there because a friend recommended it, or you saw a video, or you've tried meditation apps and nothing quite worked. You sit on a mat or a chair. The teacher begins guiding you through something called the preparatory breath. And already, within minutes, something subtle begins to shift. This preparatory phase uses a technique called Ujjayi, often translated as victorious breath. You constrict the back of your throat slightly so each breath makes a soft oceanic sound audible to you but not to anyone across the room. Your hands rest on your knees, palms facing up. Each inhale and exhale is longer than what you're used to, maybe 4 seconds in, 6 out. Within minutes, your heart rate begins to slow. The mental chatter, while still present, feels slightly less urgent. For many people, especially those who've spent years breathing shallowly without realizing it, this alone feels noticeably calming. But this is just the warm-up. The real journey hasn't started yet. After the preparatory phase, the teacher guides you into the core sequence. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. The practice moves through 3 distinct rhythms of breath. First comes slow breathing, even slower than before, sometimes as few as to 2-4 breaths per minute. Then a medium pace, around 30 to 40 breaths per minute. Then a rapid phase where you might be breathing 60 to 80 times per minute or more. Each rhythm serves a specific purpose in the overall sequence. The transitions between them are where much of the transformative power actually lies. If you've never done this before, the rapid phase can feel strange, even alarming. Your body isn't accustomed to breathing this fast while sitting completely still. It's a pattern your system associates with running, with exertion, with emergency. But you're not running. You're sitting cross-legged on a mat, and this mismatch between the breathing pattern and the physical stillness is part of what makes the practice so powerful. Your nervous system receives the signal of intensity without any actual threat. You learn, at a deep physiological level, that you can experience strong sensations and still be okay. You can have intensity without panic. Over time, this rewires something fundamental in your brain's threat detection circuitry. First-timer experiences vary enormously, and this is where honest expectation matters. Some people do feel immediate calm or unexpected emotional release. But many report something messier and more interesting. During the rapid breathing phase, your fingers might tingle. Your lips might feel numb. You might feel lightheaded or strangely warm. These are normal physiological responses to shifts in carbon dioxide and oxygen levels, and trained teachers guide you through them safely. What's more revealing is what happens emotionally. Some people start crying without knowing why. Not sobbing from sadness necessarily, but a kind of release that feels purely physical, as if something stuck has finally come unstuck. Others feel waves of laughter or inexplicable joy. Some feel nothing dramatic at all, just a quietness afterward they can't quite explain. A friend of mine spent her first 2 sessions feeling almost bored, convinced she was doing it wrong. On the 3rd day, during the final relaxation, she suddenly felt a weight lift from her chest that she hadn't even known she was carrying. She'd been holding on to grief from a breakup 2 years earlier, and her body had been bracing against it so long she'd stopped noticing. The breath found it before her conscious mind did. This is not unusual. The practice seems to meet you wherever you are, working on whatever layer of stress or tension is most accessible that day. This brings up a question many people ask when they first hear about this. If it's just breathing, And we all breathe constantly. Why is a structured technique necessary? Why can't you just take deep breaths on your own and get the same results? The answer lies in specificity and accumulated effect. Think of physical exercise. Walking is natural and beneficial. But if you want to train for a marathon or rehabilitate an injury, you need a structured program targeting specific systems in a specific order. Sudarshan Kriya works the same way. The sequence isn't random. Each rhythm targets a different aspect of your nervous system, and the order matters. The slow breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system and increases heart rate variability, a key marker of stress resilience. The rapid breathing temporarily activates the sympathetic system in a controlled, safe environment, followed immediately by periods of rest. This trains what scientists call autonomic flexibility, your nervous system's ability to shift smoothly between states of alertness and relaxation. People with high autonomic flexibility can handle a stressful event and recover quickly afterward. People with low flexibility, which describes many of us in the modern world, get stuck in stress mode, unable to fully relax even when the stressor is long gone. The breathing sequence essentially exercises your nervous system like a muscle. The research supporting this is more substantial than most people expect. Harvard Medical School published a study in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry examining Sudarshan Kriya for individuals with treatment-resistant depression. The results, according to the researchers, showed notable improvements in depression scores among participants compared to a control group. A study published in Frontiers in Psychiatry reported that participants who practiced regularly showed an average cortisol reduction of 57% after 2 weeks, according to the researchers. EEG brain imaging shows increased alpha wave activity during and after the practice, the brain wave pattern associated with relaxed alertness, what meditators often describe as calm focus. These are not subjective testimonials. These are measurable, peer-reviewed, published findings. Yale University researchers studied the technique with veterans and disaster survivors, and their published findings documented improvements in PTSD-related symptoms among participants. India's All India Institute of Medical Sciences conducted one of the largest studies, with over 2,000 participants, finding significant improvements in anxiety, depression, and overall quality of life scores. The World Health Organization has recognized the Art of Living Foundation's programs for their contributions to global mental health. The mechanism behind these effects is increasingly understood. The specific breathing patterns stimulate the vagus nerve, a major pathway that runs from the brainstem through the neck and into the chest and abdomen. Vagus nerve stimulation is associated with reduced inflammation, improved mood regulation, and stronger emotional resilience. But statistics and brain scans, however impressive, don't fully capture why people keep coming back to this practice day after day, year after year. The real-world benefits people report are often simpler and more intimate. A corporate executive in Mumbai told me the practice saved his marriage, not because it fixed his wife, but because it gave him the pause he desperately needed between feeling anger and expressing it. A university student in London said she used to have panic attacks before every exam. After learning the technique, she still felt nervous but could breathe through it instead of spiraling. A retired nurse in California described it as the difference between being tossed around by every wave of emotion and learning to sit at the bottom of the ocean, where the water stays still even when the surface is stormy. A veteran with PTSD told researchers that for the first time in years, he slept through the night without nightmares. These aren't miracles in the comic book sense. Nobody gained the ability to fly or see through walls. But for people who have been living with a constant background hum of anxiety, dread, or numbness, the shift can feel just as profound. The world doesn't change. The deadlines don't disappear. The difficult people don't suddenly become saints. But something in the internal environment shifts, and with that shift comes a degree of freedom that wasn't there before. The freedom to choose a response instead of being hijacked by a reaction. The freedom to rest without guilt. If this resonated with you, if you've been carrying that invisible exhaustion and wondering if there's a way out, I hope this gave you something real to explore. If you found this valuable, please hit like, Drop a comment about your experience with breathwork or stress, and subscribe for more deep dives into practices that actually work. The breath is always there, waiting. You just have to use it.